This podcast is for you. Your co-hosts, Ben Dodge and Eric Huso at Effect Epic Consulting, believe that your potential is limitless. Tapping into this potential is how you can affect epic results in your life, relationships, and business. Welcome to the Principles of Epic Growth.
Howdy, howdy, brother.
You beat me to it.
Yes.
So I got a little something for you today.
What? You got a joke?
R-E-S-P-E-C-T. I can't even do it without laughing.
You're one of the most talented dudes I know.
But not
But you can't sing a lick.
Yeah. Whenever I sing in church, and when I say sing in church, it's only in the pews, sitting there.
Yeah,
but my son, who's got a perfect ear, thanks to his mother, who also has a perfect ear, will just tell me, "Dad, stop singing. Stop. You can't sing. Stop singing." Like over and over again until I stop.
No respect.
Yeah, exactly.
Little Rodney Dangerfield there, huh?
Yeah.
No respect.
No respect. That is today's topic. So this is I'm actually ridiculously excited about it because I think it's a problem that's absolutely rampant in society, and there's a chance that it's going to really frustrate me when we talk about this. And so I apologize in advance if we end up ranting a little bit, but the principle of respect is powerful, and knowing what it is and how to apply it, and how, more importantly, how to cultivate it and keep yourself in check with it, you can operate with power in your relationships with people. And it's worth, hours of podcasts, and we're going to try and do it here in a few minutes. So we're going to crank through it, but it is fantastic.
Yeah. I love the word cultivate. Cultivate is a great way to, as a leader, to create respect in your relationships, in your culture, etc. And respect is one of those words that everybody knows. Like, you say that word respect, for half of you, that song by Aretha Franklin comes to mind, R-E-S-P-E-C-T. And we think we know what it is, but we're going to expose some layers. We're going to peel back some things to show the depth of this principle we call respect and the power that it has to really create influence where you can make a difference in the lives of people in your world.
Yeah, absolutely. So I took a poll with some of my employees today, some of my staff, and I asked, and other people too, last night and today, I asked for them to try and define what respect is. I said, hey, what do you think respect is? How would you define it? If I were to go home today and teach my 9-year-old kid what respect is, he said, "Daddy, what's respect?" What would my answer be? What do you guys think? How would you help me define it? The funny thing is 100% of the answers were some sort of verb. It was their opinion of how to demonstrate respect, but it wasn't a definition of respect. Almost always. Always, 100% of the time. But it was always something along the lines of, well, you got to give it to earn it, that kind of stuff. You got to love other people. It was funny. It was always a verb. It was always a verb. And I totally actually respect their answers, but it doesn't help us understand it. So I'll pose that question to you. You're probably already thinking about it out there, audience. How would you define respect? Is respect. That's right. What's your definition of respect? If you want a fun little treat and a little rabbit hole, Google it. There's a ton of variations there, from Wikipedia to Webster to Urban Dictionaries to a billion things. I think there's like a common thread, and the looking at it through the right paradigm, you can kind of pick out that common thread, and here's how the words should string together for an accurate definition of respect. Amongst all the definitions out there really is a common thread. Here it is: a regard towards someone or something that you esteem of value or worthy of value. A regard.
Some deep words there, yeah.
Yeah. It's having a regard towards someone or something that you esteem as value or worthy of value.
Ultimately, respect then is the value that we place on other human beings.
Yeah, so if you have respect, you have a mindset or a paradigm of valuing something about that thing or person. And so you can also then demonstrate that value or that regard that you esteem worthy, right? So you can show your respect in lots of ways, which is kind of a common way that people define respect is by the way they think it should be shown, but no one knows really what it is.
Yeah. So respect really is the opportunity to demonstrate how you regard other human beings. Like, what value do you place on human life? And there's so many opportunities that we have, just because we all see the world differently, to devalue human beings, to discount human beings, to be frustrated, to think that other people are ignorant or misinformed, or whatever it might be. And that just poses possibilities to devalue them, and then limits your opportunities to influence them. So we'll talk about some principles today that will help us to see people. In fact, I love the Latin root of the word respect, respectus, which means to regard, to look at, to see again. So if you are open to it, the end of our podcast today, with beginning with end in mind, you'll be able to give people a second look. People that you may have discounted, people that you may have disregarded or seen as less valuable, you'll have the opportunity to cast aside any paradigms that you have that have devalued them and see them again, to see if they are worthy of receiving your respect.
So I love that. I love that whole look again thing, because the obvious and huge implication there is that there's a value judgment. You're looking again because you might not have seen anything that you could stand behind or value before. So now you're looking a second time, and in that second look, you're hopefully going to be open enough to see it. But again, it's that whole value judgment, and that's the huge danger. Everyone, pay attention to this. That's the huge danger with respect. You have to be awake to the fact that you're making a judgment call. When you give your respect or show your respect, you're making a judgment call that thing or person is of value to you. More dangerous than that, when you withhold your respect, you're making a judgment call that thing or person is not of value to you. The douche meter right now, starts to rise in my mind, right? Don't be a jerk. Are you really not going to have respect? So now, that being said, there is a whole lot of circumstances and things and people and actions and behaviors that people do that you can absolutely not have respect for and shouldn't have respect for. But it's not a winner take all here. We're not judged on hopefully one thought or one behavior or one, way of being. So if there's something about a person that you don't respect, the challenge would be find something that you do respect. Don't get hung up on the one blatant obvious thing. It's for a murderer. Okay, look, a murderer. That's super extreme, but I obviously don't respect the behavior or the action of murder. It's not something that I esteem of being valuable or worthy of value. It's horrible on the society. It's horrible on the victims and their family members and everything else. So yeah, but maybe there's something else about that person. If I got to know him, I could respect. If
you'll look again at that person, you'll see a human being who is most likely hurting. You'll see a human being who probably has experienced a lot of pain, who has experienced a lot of rejection, who has some mental health problems, or whatever it might be. But if you'll take the time to look again, you'll see a human being inside of that person or that shell that you despise because of their action. And it doesn't mean that you agree with them. It doesn't mean that you condone any behavior that they do, but just the action of looking again and looking at the human being that's in front of you just opens up the opportunity to relate to them. And when you open up that opportunity to relate, when you're not judging them, and you're not judging their value, you're not putting conditions. That's one of the problems with this judgment of, hey, I'm going to judge whether or not you're valuable or not. I'm going to judge whether or not you're worthy of my respect, is we make our love conditional for that person.
That's right.
And then when we put conditions on that, then most likely they're not going to meet those conditions, and they won't be valuable for us. And so we have to be with them in a way where we're not judging them. And like I said, it doesn't mean that you condone or you agree with any behavior, but just to see them as a human being and not judge them. Then they will begin to open up about who they are, and that just opens up opportunities to influence and relate and connect.
The proud, those of you or those of us who suffer with pride, arrogance and whatnot, you will, if you're taking an honest look at yourself, you'll know that if you're one of those people, you're going to struggle with respect. The amount of things and or people you respect will be very limited compared to the person of humility.
Mm-hmm.
So a humble person will respect quite a bit. A proud person won't, because he'll think so much of himself that other things are less than, and are then less than of value, and so the respect isn't there.
Now you bring up an irony, because it's hard to give something that you don't have. And so if you don't have self-respect, it makes it really challenging to give respect to somebody else.
So let me clarify that, because arrogance is not self-respect.
Right. And the irony of what you just shared is the humble person is the person who's able to give respect. The conceited, self-centered person, it makes that hard for that person to respect other people. And that's the irony in this, is
That's true.
The more humble you are, the more respect that you'll have for yourself. Humility isn't something where you self-loathe. That's not humility at all in any way. Humility is recognizing that you are powerful, and you recognize the source of your powerful is outside yourself. That's my definition of humility anyway. But when you are humble, then you also are able to see the greatness in other people, and you're able to see the value of other people.
That's right. In other words, you have a greater capacity of respect.
Yeah.
Yeah, humility and respect, and arrogance and respect, they're all directly tied to each other in proportions. So yeah, absolutely check yourself there. I agree.
When you're not humble, it puts you in a position to compare yourself to other people and to compete against other people in those comparisons, and to, in your mind, put yourself above other people, so that you're more important than them.
Yeah, so a judgmental person, i.e. a super arrogant person who's also judgmental. There's some differences there, I get that. But a judgmental person's making judgment calls all the time, and respect is just a judgment call of whether or not this thing or person is worthy of value, whether or not you can regard them, whether you can esteem them as anything of worth. Well, if you're arrogant and making a lot of judgment calls, then there's not going to be a lot of people there that you're going to, even people who are better than you, you're going to have a hard time respecting, because you'll find a flaw in them instead. Yeah. Because you're so competitive and so arrogant. Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah. At which point you lose power. You lose power in your relationships. You'll often feel alone. You won't feel like you have a team around you. I mean, there's a lot of things here that we can break down someday on all this. A great kissing cousin to this topic is to go back to our podcast on self-esteem. That's a great one. Confidence and self-esteem. Sure.
Beautiful.
So the question would be that I would ask next is who should you respect? Who?
Well, if they have a brain.
What if they don't have a brain?
And heartbeat, then they're worthy of our respect.
Why?
Well, we can't ever lose the humanity in other people. And if you're with a human being, there's something of value in that. And, like I said earlier, it doesn't mean that you condone any actions that they do or you agree with all the actions that they do. But, the more that you're able to cast aside your judgments of other people, the easier it is to see value and to respect that value in other people. And so if you're going to put limits on, well, I will only respect this kind of people, then you're just limiting your influence. You're just limiting the possibility of what you can create in terms of relationships with other people and influence. And so
sure.
I personally choose to say, what, I'm not going to put any limits. Doesn't matter what you've done. It doesn't matter what your belief system is. It doesn't matter what your context. I'm going to see you as a person that is worthy of that respect. And ultimately, you could destroy that respect through your choices, but ultimately I'm going to give you a second look. I'm going to see you as somebody who's worthy of that.
So for you, the answer is you'll break respect down to a very basic level of human being.
Mm-hmm.
And that's enough to show respect. I get that. That's a great answer. So, there's degrees of respect. Let's be honest. There are absolutely degrees of respect. And if you're struggling with respect, then break it down to something simple where you can at least find an ability to respect them because they're a human being and see that because they're a human being, they're going to have feelings, emotions, families, possibly rights, whatever. This is the problem that our country struggled with slavery a long time ago. They couldn't wrap their minds around it, right? And actually have respect for the people in the slave industry because they felt that they weren't human, or at least equal. So yeah, I get it. So that's a great start, I think, who should you respect? Yeah, anyone who's a human being because of the simple fact that they're a human being. And that's a very basic level of respect, and I like it. I think when we talk about who you should respect, I think it starts first with you. Right? You should really figure out how to respect yourself. How can you answer this question? How can you find regard for yourself? How can you esteem yourself as something of value or as worthy of value? You need to go down that path. That's a personal journey that you should be going down, and in some cases, if not most cases, should be reaffirmed on a daily basis as you give it a few minutes of reflection and figure out who you are and why you're here and how amazing you are. And then go rock your day. Develop that respect first, cultivate that respect first within you. And then as Eric was talking about, for him, the next step would be simply, if you're a human being, I've got respect. And I get that. A lot of people will say respect is earned. You don't got it until you earn it. You respect me, then I'll respect you. Or you have my respect if you can, X, Y, Z. Yeah. Like if you can climb up there and, that tall rope in gym class or something, then I'll respect you. Otherwise, you're just a piece of trash, or whatever. That's different, isn't it? Like, I think there are some degrees of respect that are earned. You can just look at any military service personnel that you might run into, right, where they're in full military gear, and there's a sense of respect just for who they are. Just because of their very obvious sacrifice for our country, for us as citizens, right? So there's some respect, I think, that's earned just because of the actions and commitments of other people. I absolutely firmly believe that there are degrees of respect that you can earn.
And that's your context. And I happen to share that context, right? I see somebody who's a serviceman and I have deep respect for them. And there's people in this country that don't have that same respect for servicemen. In fact, if they see a serviceman, that serviceman might represent something evil to them and might show anger and frustration towards that serviceman. And so
I get that it's context. I get that it's context related.
In our country today, between political tension and racial tension, there is such disrespect. Really, it's a disregard for the value of the human being because they have different ideological beliefs, different contexts, different, paradigms where we'll literally hate another human being because they're on the other side of an aisle. We'll literally hate a human being because they wear a different football jersey. That's how polarized our country has really become in really disregarding the value of a human being.
Right. And I appreciate how you keep bringing it back to the basic level of human being, because that's a global way to always ground yourself in respect. But there's still degrees of it. There's still respect that can be simply earned based on some achievement, some task, some role or office you hold, like as CEO maybe, or as President of the United States. There are people there's no shortage of people that hate Donald Trump, and there's no shortage of people that love Donald Trump. And at the end of the day, who cares? If you like him or hate him, you can still and should still have respect for the office of the presidency of the United States. So again, just degrees of respect. There are things that there is a version of respect really that can be earned based on what you accomplish and or the circumstances where you find yourself, like for example, an office that you hold in a company or so forth. And so Are you awake to that is the question, right? That you ask. So we started with who should you respect starts with yourself. And then, of course, on a basic level, every human being, let's not forget that we're human beings. That would solve most of the world's problems, really, if we just remembered that we're all human beings and we showed respect to each other. But I love this little YouTube example that I saw recently. I'm not a basketball guy. Eric knows that. I don't know anything about basketball. But there's a movie where Samuel Jackson's the coach. I think his name is Coach Carter. And it's like a 3-minute clip, and you guys should Google it. But essentially, Coach Carter walks into this gym with a bunch of high school students. I think they're high school students, and he's a black coach, and the team is mixed, white and black. And he comes in there, and he refers to every one of the players as sir. He's calling, and they were shocked by it, and
they weren't used to receiving that level of respect.
No, and one of them said, "I ain't no sir," and he's like, "Yes, you are. Sir is a sign of respect." And then when they start to answer questions to him, he made him say sir, which is good. But one of the statements that he made that towards the beginning of that 3-minute clip that really made an impact on me was, he said, in trying to define respect for these kids and teach them that, respect's good and they should say sir, and he'll say sir to them and that kind of thing. He says, "You'll all have my respect until you abuse it. You'll all have my respect until you abuse it." See, that's backwards than from what most people in our society currently feel like respect has to be earned. Like, I'm not going to respect you unless you actually make that touchdown or whatever. I'm not going to respect you unless you actually make the team first and foremost, right? And, where he just gladly gives the respect out. The implication, I think, in that particular scene is he's the new coach. He walks in, he introduces himself. He respects them because they're willing to play. They're willing to play for him. They're showing up for practice. They're probably on some level committed to this whole thing. And so he's got an enormous amount of respect based on some very simple factors right then and there that he's going to grant them that respect until they abuse it, at which point he withdraws their respect. Why? Because some actions aren't respectable. Some behaviors aren't respectable. And within that 3-minute segment, that other principle is also demonstrated. When a kid gets in an oral argument with him, he asks them to leave. Coach Carter asks him to leave the gym and calls the kid, afraid. Like, "I think you're just afraid." And the kid's like, "I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid of you. I'll lay you out," kind of thing. And he goes to punch the coach, and the coach just takes him out, man. Just takes him, slams him against the wall, and obviously he leaves the gym, but it's okay to withdraw. The point there, the principle there is demonstrated in that video that I really like the video for, is that it demonstrates the principle that respect can be withdrawn because there are behaviors and actions, depending on your context, that are not respectable. The caution would be, check your context. Check yourself. Be careful. If you're ever going to withdraw your respect or withhold it, not give it out, are you pretty certain that thing or that action or that person really doesn't have value? Be careful there.
Yeah.
See, because the problem is most people jump to that conclusion immediately, right? Just right to it. That's where they go from 0 to 60, and that's not okay. But the murder example is a good example. I obviously can't, respect that behavior, and so that's not going to happen for me. So that's an extreme example. But how about in our personal lives with our marriages, our employees, or our coworkers, or whatever? When you all of a sudden start withdrawing or withholding your respect, I bet you there's lots of times where you're just a jerk.
Now, I'm not familiar with this movie that you cited, but if I was a betting person, I'm going to bet that after he threw the kid out of the gym, he still had respect for the human being that was that kid. And he most likely reached out to that kid and demonstrated a level of love and concern that kid had never experienced before, a level of respect that showed that kid that in spite of that kid's actions, that the coach still saw his value as a human being. And I'll bet that kid came back and played on that team.
I don't know.
I haven't seen the movie, but I'm a betting man.
And
that's what I'm going to bet. I'm going to bet the plot.
I almost want to go watch it now. No, I agree. And another really good example too, and you can find this clip too. It's only 1.5 to 2 minutes. Is Remember the Titans with Denzel Washington. Same thing. A coach comes in. It's a brand new team. It's mixed white and black kids. It's really the height of all of that unrest in our
racial
country.
Tension,
yeah. And he took them to, that old Gettysburg battlefield, and he gave a really incredible motivational speech about respect. How you have to respect each other, or you're going to be destroyed. That was his warning in that particular movie. The lack of respect will destroy you, and that'd be a bloodbath.
It will destroy any team.
Yeah.
So if you're a leader of a team and there's a lack of respect, like your team is on the verge of crumbling.
That's right.
And so as the leader of the team, you have to be with your team players, your teammates, the members, the people that work for you in a way where they can see the other human beings on that team.
That's right.
For who they are. And in respect, it's hard to see the value of somebody else's life if you can't see the value of your own. So in terms of, you asked a question a couple minutes ago about, how do I create self-respect? And the actions are really similar to how do you respect other people. You just have to apply them to yourself. So, if you're judging other people, if you're withholding value of other people, you're disrespecting them. And the same holds true for you. If you're judging yourself and you're withholding value from yourself, then you're disrespecting yourself. And so that little voice in your head that's consistently telling you that you're not good enough and you're not strong enough and you're not this enough and you're not that enough, you're not smart enough, you're not that, you have to shut that voice down, because that voice is disrespecting you. That voice is devaluing you. And that voice is not the truth. Let me repeat that. That voice is not the truth.
Yeah, I love that.
So you have to shut that voice down. And you have to love yourself unconditionally. You have to see yourself with all your flaws and all your weaknesses as just perfect the way you are. And that takes a lot of work. That takes a lot of work to get to the point where you can be comfortable in your own skin with all of your weaknesses and flaws, see yourself as just being perfect as you are. And the miracle happens is now that you're demonstrating respect for yourself, you're able to do that for other people. You don't have that little voice judging. And I'm going to put on a parenting hat here. So as a parent, if you're a parent of teenagers, there's a likelihood that you're constantly criticizing the actions of your children, whether verbally or in your mind. They're not good enough, they're not this enough, they're too messy, they're irresponsible, they're not there's a little voice that's consistently criticizing them because they're teenagers and they don't act like you yet.
That's right.
And so you've got that voice just judging, they're not good enough, they're not good enough, they're not good enough. And you devalue them. You devalue them as a human being. And so then you start to control them. And you start to force them to fit a mold that you feel like, this is the perfect teenager. And this is one of the biggest traps that parents fall into, is they try to raise the perfect teenager. And that doesn't exist. Instead...
Whoa, what are you talking about? I was the perfect teenager.
Let's get your dad on the phone.
Yeah. Sorry, I should have interrupted because we all know I was not the perfect teenager.
But this is one of the biggest trials, biggest traps that parents will fall into, is disrespecting their teenagers because they're judging them consistently and they're not seeing them as the valuable human beings that they are. They're not seeing them as being perfect as they are, and separating behaviors from their value as a human being. And so then you start to try to control them. Then, whether you're a teenager or an adult, doesn't matter. You don't like to be controlled. And so that's when you start to get the rebellion and the pushback and the fractured relationship. And now you're in a situation where you have no influence over your teenager, where your teenager doesn't come to you for advice. They don't come to you when life is hard. They don't come to you when they're struggling. In fact, they run away from you because they don't respect you, because they're reciprocating the same thing that you're giving them. They're reciprocating the disrespect. They're judging you as, my parents aren't smart enough. They don't know what they're talking about. They're old. They're right. Out of touch, right. Et cetera, et cetera. And so now you have this two separate camps that can't see eye to eye, separated by a large gulf called disrespect. That now there's no connection. There's no influence. There's no relationship there. So if you're going to have respect for other people, you've got to practice first on yourself. You've got to turn that judgment voice off that's consistently berating you You got to turn that off, and you got to see yourself as perfect as you are in spite of all your flaws. And when you have that going on with people that you want to have influence, you've got to turn that judgment machine off. You've got to turn that mind off. And you've got to see the people that are in front of you as human beings that have a different context, a different paradigm, a different way of seeing the world. And not that you have to agree with them, but just listen to them. Authentically listen to them without judgment. And that will create a bond, a connection, a respect that then paves the way for future influence.
So there's two powerful principles that are kind of hidden in that wonderful teaching you taught us there. One that I like to shed some light on is you have the ability as one person in a relationship to influence the other relationship. I can't say that enough. You have the ability as one person in a relationship to influence the other person in the relationship, for good, incredible good, change even. Now you can't force change on anyone, but your way of being around that person, your personal interactions with that person can influence and elevate that person to a whole set of new paradigms, contexts, and behaviors, just because of the way and the powerful way that you are around them. Okay. Respect is the key here.
Yep.
So respect is the key to that. So for example, if you've got kids that are disrespecting you, you've got coworkers that are disrespecting you, employees that are disrespecting you, and
disrespecting each other.
Yeah. Use respect. First of all, look in the mirror. The problem's you, not your employees, not your spouse, not your kids, not your whatever. Look in the mirror and figure out where you suck at showing respect. And not just showing, because that's the verb part. How about understanding it? Do you actually understand what value judgments you're making? Like what respect judgments you're making? Understand those, and then figure out how you're going to do better at demonstrating it, how you're going to show it to those people. Your way of being around them, your personal choices, your interactions in that relationship should demonstrate a high level of respect. Watch then that trickle down to where everyone respects each other. Great example depicted in the movie we already mentioned. I Remember the Titans with Denzel Washington, where the leadership was resting on first on Denzel's shoulders essentially, but then down to the quarterback, right? Mm-hmm. And from there, when he finally bought into the mission and of uniting these two races and being an incredible powerhouse football team, then it trickled down from there. And there was a little conversation at the end of their football camp with the white guy had a black counterpart, and I think it was a black counterpart that told him, "Hey man, leadership is as you do," or whatever, something like that. Like, it starts with you. Anyways, you have the power to influence a relationship. So first check in the mirror, figure out where you are sucking it up, right? Where you really stink at looking at what respect is in your own life and what value judgments you're placing or withholding or whatever. And then figure out how a better way to demonstrate, a more powerful way to demonstrate that in your relationships. And the second thing with respect here that is really, it's pretty incredible. So, got to think about it for a minute here. It'll come to me. I'm really impressed with the fact that one person can influence a relationship.
Yeah, I agree with that principle 100%. And the irony of that is that the people that are having these failed relationships, the excuse that they make is it takes two to make a relationship. It takes two. No. If you want to be an owner, then it takes one. If you want to be a victim, then it takes two.
Yeah, extreme ownership. Sure.
Yeah.
So in the disrespect world, I've thought of the second thing. Thanks. The second principle that's really powerful there is what you tolerate becomes normal. So if you're in what you might call a toxic environment, what we all might call a toxic environment where there's rampant disrespect, there's or no respect, right? Which is probably the same thing as disrespect. If that exists in your relationships with your spouse, your coworkers, your kids, your boss, your whatever, right? If you've got a disrespect problem and people are just not respecting you, one of the things I direct you to first is your own self-esteem and your own respect. Figure that out, get on board and start influencing everybody else around you. But two, be careful what you tolerate. Okay? Be careful what you tolerate. What you tolerate becomes normal. That becomes the standard. So try and influence on your own. And then, of course, be very mindful and intentional and awake to your own power as a creator to not tolerate that and to create a different environment and world around yourself.
Beautiful. Beautiful. So, let's give some applications. So things that we can do to practice. We've talked about parenting examples with teenagers a bit. We talked about personally with shutting off the judgment machine in your mind that's disrespecting yourself. If you're in the workplace and you're the leader of a team and there's just not a feeling of respect in the culture, and let's say that you're not the leader, okay? Let's say you're not the leader. A common victim mentality is going to be that, there's nothing that I can do about it because the leader is a disrespectful person, like he doesn't demonstrate respect. What advice would you have for that employee that's in that situation where in the culture there's disrespect and the leader isn't one who is awake to that and is in fact accused of being disrespectful by the rest of the employees?
There's so many ways that can go. But first and foremost, one of the things I'd say is lead up the chain. Mm-hmm. First, look inward, always look inward. First, look inward, always look inward, and see if you can't figure out self-respect and your own self-esteem and start influencing those around you so that respect becomes the culture in your world. Maybe he disrespects other people, but he or she will stop disrespecting you because of the powerful way of being that you have created around your relationships with other people. And then ultimately, if none of this works and this guy is then you might be out of alignment. You might be out of alignment with this job. Spread your wings, baby. Fly. Yeah. You don't got to take that. What you tolerate becomes the normal standard. So always see if you can influence and see if you can resolve it. Also check to make sure that you're just not off, because we're not perfect as human beings and our paradigm and our context could be way off. And so we might be seeing something completely wrong and misinterpreting it. That happens all the time. Just look at that. It
happens all the time. And we're blind to it.
That's right.
So we all have a paradigm. We all have a context that influences how we see people. You brought up a couple of paradigms here that are your paradigms where you see the office of the President of the United States as something that's worthy of respect. You've talked about somebody in the military.
I am American.
Who is worthy of respect. And that's your paradigm and context. And,
that's right.
And while I agree with that, I recognize that there are Americans, there are people that would disagree with you, that would say, no, the office of the President of the United States is not worthy of my respect, and that someone who serves in the military is not worthy of my respect. And they have some kind of paradigm that's created that.
Sure.
And so we have to be awake to our paradigms and recognize that our paradigms are the things that are creating how we see and how we value. Okay?
That's right.
So we all see people with money in a different paradigm. So you might look at somebody who's really wealthy and you might think that they're a low-life piece of trash. And somebody else might look at somebody with a lot of money and have ultimate admiration and respect for the hard work that they've done to acquire that kind of wealth. You might look at an athlete as somebody who's like just incredible with all that talent. And somebody else might look at an athlete and be like, that person's dumb as a post, and why are they wasting their life playing games? And all that is based on the context and the paradigm in which you see. And if you're asleep to that, then that paradigm will shape and color how you see other people, and you might miss the value in human beings. You might miss the value in a lot of things in this earth. And so I'll give you one example. So say you saw a homeless man on the street corner.
I see him all the time.
Okay. And in fact, I just saw a social media post recently where this person was really critical of this homeless man because he had something of value. Like, it must be nice, a bum has something of value, was the post. And it's like, okay. So some people might see this homeless man as somebody who's dirty, somebody who's disgusting, somebody who's a disgrace to society. He's just a He's lazy, he's enabled, he's a drug addict, he's scary, he's threatening. Some people might look at him with a little bit of sympathy, like, what a tragedy. There's a human being that doesn't have a home, doesn't have a family, doesn't have friends, really, So you might look at him with a bit of empathy. Others might look at him as embarrassed, like I'm embarrassed that we as a society would tolerate someone to get to that level. Somebody might not even see him. You might just be so focused on you that there could be a homeless man on the side of the road and you just pass by him and don't even see him. Somebody, you might just look at him and say, hey, look at that nice homeless man there, smiling at the people that drive by on the off-ramp of the freeway. Just putting a smile on people's face. I love that. And some people might be curious to actually get to know that person. Like, what's your story? Like, how did you get here? And tell me a little bit about yourself. Now, the interesting thing is your paradigm is going to shape and influence and color how you see that homeless man.
Sure.
And how you see that homeless man is going to have a direct impact on his experience of you and his reaction to you. So if you see that homeless man as threatening or as a disgrace to society or as a lazy, enabled slob, like, that's going to provoke a response from that homeless man. Very different than if you see that homeless man as a human being and you want to get to know him and you show some empathy towards him and you want to know his story. And so, my friends, that is an example, a simple example of how if you can be awake to your paradigm and how you see other people, and you can then change your paradigm. If you want to change your relationship, change your paradigm, change that context whether you see people, and how you see people influences how they act towards you and how they respond. That's how you influence. That's how you change the culture. That's how you change relationships. That's how you make a difference. That's how you demonstrate leadership.
Yeah, you just relate to them. And the key, of course, is respect.
Yeah.
Let's wrap it up. So respect is a powerful way of being. Your way of being as a person can have more power in it, more influence in your relationships. You can accomplish more in this world just by understanding what respect is and by demonstrating it in your relationships. So remember, it's a value judgment. It's a regard towards someone or something that you esteem as having value or worthy of value. So really, are you like the best judge on the planet? Be careful there, right? Like we talked about all that. So just know that that's what respect is. Do you have it for yourself? Can you give it to other people? Do you give it right now and then withdraw it later only when it's justified? Or do you make people earn it? Who are you with your respect? Figure that out and figure out who you want to be. Doesn't matter who you are right now. Figure out who you want to be and be that person.
Yeah.
And then the last thing, we kind of touched on this, is one of the principles of respect there, I think, would be you can always find something to respect in someone or something. And if you can't, then you're the problem, not that thing or that person. So, I love Eric mentioned quite a bit the whole human being thing. That's a really basic level version of respect, but it's a higher like calling, so to speak, of respect, in the sense that if you can get to that point where you're authentic and respecting everybody just because they're a human being, we're talking Gandhi level here, right? And so it's fantastic. So get to the point where you can be authentic, where you can see another human being and go, I have the ultimate respect for that person just because he's a human being. Until you get there, start finding all the other things that you can respect, and make sure that you demonstrate it freely, be powerful, and improve, be a little bit better today than you were yesterday. That's always the goal. A little bit better today than you were yesterday on whatever principle or issue you're working on in your life. Pick one, be a little better today than you were yesterday.
Beautiful. All right. Have a great week.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for listening to the Principles of Epic Growth podcast, your path to epic performance and life with incredible growth.